you very much. Wonderful. Hi, everybody. I'm worried my pants are going to drop. All right. Great to be here. Great to talk about this very important topic. Sustainable cities, eco-cities, zero carbon, low carbon cities, City 2.0. The whole world is talking about this. And yet it's only here in China that we're trying at a serious scale to actually realize eco-cities in the sense of an integrated system built from scratch. I will show you that it is specifically here in China that we can see at hyper speed that all these models we're trying to develop don't work. It is specifically China that proves these models fail and actually proves that me and my colleagues, planners, architects, at the moment don't know what we're doing yet. But it's also here in China where there's a real opportunity to develop new models that can actually put China in a position to become a leader of green thought, of eco-city planning. I'm trying to suggest today that there are 5 main contradictions, real hurdles, contradictions at the heart of the planning discipline. And hopefully I can introduce suggestions how we can sort of circumvent them with this model, Cloud City, or an evolutionary planning of eco-landscapes. The first assumption is quite simple. Many of my friends here too, architects, we're all trying to build green buildings. It's not enough. An accumulation, a group of green buildings still doesn't make a green city. For instance, we're still stuck in traffic even though all these buildings would be zero carbon. But these extreme conditions I'm talking about here in China are much more radical, go way beyond the architectural scale. This is the Chengdu-Chongqing urban corridor in Sichuan in 1990. Bear with me, I'm going to go very quickly. Every slide is 1 year of urban expansion. So 18 years in total. I think that should begin to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. Extreme, organic-driven growth, or as I call it, market-driven, unintentional development, MUD. MUD has been taking over the landscapes, and not just here in China, but on a smaller scale, it's actually at the heart of urban expansion everywhere. MUD defies design. MUD basically prevents models from being developed. This is my first contradiction. It's so profound, we really have to assume that maybe the city is not our greatest invention. Maybe the city is a mere byproduct of civilization. If you assume that here in China we design so much, we design these compounds at micro scale to the doorknob very quickly. It seems you have real control over your urban landscape. But if you zoom out, look at the satellite image, you see that these compounds, micro-planned compounds, begin to glue together, grow together, merge together into macro-organic landscapes. So, a premature conclusion is no new cities. If we want to be sustainable, we should not build new cities. Every time we position one of these satellites on the landscape, it's another instance, another starting point for more sprawl. This is the map you generally see of China. Clean, crisp, urban settlements, big, large, to the very small. What we really should be looking at is the spaces in between these dots, in between the cities. This map shows the population density. If you look at the most concentrated areas, you actually see an urban field roughly the size of France, with the density of an American small-sized city. So a true metropolitan field, or even megalopolis. That means that the real urban pattern is divided by 6 large clusters. The largest one right here from Shanghai all the way to Beijing. In that cluster, also all the problems accumulate. This is a map of water pollution, for instance. Also, all the energy consumption occurs in that concentrated region. And the struggle for space. If you zoom, it's hard to see, but this green map is the most productive agricultural area in China. And the red, the fastest expanding urban region. These are perfectly overlapping, which is what this map shows. Buildings and ecology, cities and ecology are competing for the same space. This concentration can be read for many different aspects, economy, etc. It really delivers what I think is the only true megalopolis in the world of already over 400 million people. Nobody has been talking about this. Planners, architects, politicians. Nobody's really addressing this because it's happening below the radar. This is a sampling of satellite images that reveal the growth is happening at the village level. It's so bad that actually these villages in the last 30 years have exploded in size to form a contiguous urban pattern, touching each other all the way. So when we started 8-9 years ago to do a project mapping how to respond to one of China's craziest proposals, how to design 400 new cities of 1 million people each by 2020, first thing we found after a few months of research is that there was already in place one megalopolis of 400 million plus and growing fast. Can we even begin to steer that landscape, coax it, try and control its expansion, make sure that all the green space isn't being consumed? The one tool I want to suggest that we have left to do this, other than taxes, is public transportation and to an extent road transportation. This proposal is the first suggestion how we can begin to even further concentrate this urbanization into an almost complete continuous urban ridge running from here in Shanghai to Beijing, along the roads and along the high-speed rail. That's the starting point. Public transportation as a tool to begin to tame the beast, if you will. It's not enough. The second major contradiction is that even if we design really smart, high-tech, sophisticated eco-cities, one, they make up only a very small part of the built environment, and two, all these cities are plugged into the Chinese power grid. Chinese energy is sadly 80% coal-based. So you have your nice, smart city, you plug it in, it's not very smart, even if it looks the way. The good thing is, renewable potential in China is awesome. We have solar in the west, we have wind in the north, we have a lot of biomass potential in the entire east where the people are living, some hydro and some geothermal in the south. That's a beautiful split right along where the urbanization is happening. Very dense areas on this side we can adopt to apply very localized biomass regeneration, applying local technology to turn this into sustainable renewables. in the empty areas of China, there's vast space to do industrial scale harvesting of renewable energy. The challenge is to transport energy in an efficient way. Unlike Europe, let alone the States, China doesn't just talk about one of the most important backbones of a green country, the smart grid, the nationwide smart grid. Europe wants it by 2050. China has large parts in place. A smart grid is a grid that allows you to sell back energy to the power grid. And more importantly, the ultra-high voltage grid, the highways of renewable energy, are already in place. Between the coal fields and where people are consuming the energy, basically, let's see if I can go back. Between the coal fields and the urban areas, there are these ultra-high lines already in place. Allow us to transport renewable energy from the origin, from the source, very efficiently to the cities. It's a major advantage. Now, what we've done is suggest, could we simply look at the coal-rich areas and the places where they have money to invest and convert those places into renewable harvesting regions? So we did that for these maps, and actually it already delivers enough energy to make China completely renewable today. More than enough. But we're looking at 2030. For 2030, 88%. I'm a bit of a precise man. I want to make China completely sustainable. The 12% has to come from gained efficiency, compact cities. We started to look at transportation in more detail. What is it that we can develop? If we can't build new cities, where do we go? This is a little formula suggesting we have to focus on regions that are already urbanizing, already have a serious amount of infrastructure in place that delivers this kind of pattern. Let's say the backbone of a green China. Within that pattern, there are already almost 500 eco-hubs, urban settlements that we can develop that can become the starting point for green growth. Still not quite sufficient. We got our first project, the first major planning project here in Tianjin at the harbor at Yujiapo. They asked us to design this green CBD. Okay, great, very exciting. If we looked at the map, it revealed it's extremely polluted already. How can you make an eco-city in an environment that is highly polluted? That is the third contradiction. We did our job as best as we could, making the city comply with Western standards of ecology, walkable, etc. But we left with this sensation we have to really acknowledge China is a green industrial hybrid. Chinese cities, its eco-cities, must become more than just zero carbon. They must begin to remediate their environment. And that's very difficult, because it's difficult to give people responsibility. One of the reasons is the water. Pollution at the end of the day always goes through the water system. And as you can see, water systems across the globe are fully connected. So pollution goes through and you can always blame your neighbor. It wasn't me, actually pollution was already there. And in China, you're probably right. So we look at watersheds. This is the Sichuan Basin again with Chengdu, Chongqing. Very clean, crisp bubble within which you know the water goes in here, goes out there. You can begin to measure it. You can give people responsibility. In fact, we're suggesting this network, Cloud City, is becoming the network that will start to clean up China. But we still need space to grow. And all these places are already heavily industrialized. So how can we begin to re-urbanize and de-industrialize slowly but surely? This is a project in Shenzhen where you can see what would normally happen. Even with the mountains and a dense environment, the city would begin to bleed into the natural countryside. What we're trying to do is actually reverse that process, or cellular growth, where the countryside, the natural environment, starts eating back into the city, producing these clean, crisp, clearly controllable urban environments. Here you see them, which become the corridors for your new city. Nature becomes the backbone of your living environment. This is a rendering. That means the footprint of the city suddenly is not so important anymore. It doesn't matter how big it is. It really matters what the fingerprint is, the makeup, the programmatic mix. And this space, this industrial space, is available across the country, from the very large cities to the tiny settlements. This is a tiny little city in Sichuan. They have, over the last 30 years, all doubled in size, our ×2 hypothesis. And it really is the case, if you look at these urban fabrics. So if we look at Nanchong, for instance, we're trying to go from this industrial environment to this very rich, well, ideally, almost Manhattan-like condition. Let's go very quickly. First step, we map very carefully what's going on. Map the road system, large 200 by 200 grid, industrial, huge amount of industry. A little bit of housing, water, vast, underutilized environment with room to grow. So we take the factories and try and bulge them together, stack them up. Beautiful buildings, 50s, 60s, 70s factories we can renovate, upgrade, even make them into beautiful lofts, studio spaces, etc. But the big challenge remains flexibility. We do not want to create static environments, cities that are planned instantly and stuck on the map as is going on right now. But we're left with this grid, this large grid. So what do? We try and refine it. We introduce a secondary grid of public transportation. These are the green corridors where your public transportation can occur. Anywhere. We don't want to plan it now. We're creating the space for future planners to decide what the best place is for those transportation systems to occur. And then you can choose. Do you want to live in Paris or Chicago or Manhattan? The pattern doesn't matter. This could ultimately look something like this, where the city begins to mediate between your natural landscapes, the water and the mountains. And the city, the green grid, starts to eat into the old existing cities. I have to hurry up, I think. Some gory pictures. The last remaining serious challenge, or even contradiction, is current regulations. We cannot build any of these green cities today because the current regulations don't allow it. That's the case here in China. It's pretty much the case everywhere. Our regulations are not up to date with ideas such as the City 2.0. So when we got our big break, hopefully, to develop this eco-city, Caofeijian, in the north of China, and produce a future vision, because the government realized actually all this technology is quite insufficient to make a green living environment, we suggested we need a radical new approach. To go from a generic proposal, a static plan, instant, to a genetic, evolving type of planning, we need to start organizing ourselves, collaborating in a radically new way. What we did was, instead of cutting the map up in 10 pieces and giving everybody one piece, we invited 10 rather brilliant teams to work in relay, one after each other, building on top of each other. Every team adding 100,000 people to the city of 1 million, as if it was their ideal scenario, designing for 3 years, 3 years, 3 years, but in a very fast pace. So suddenly, using a relay method, simulating the future of these cities in the computer, we can respond to the speed that China demands but deliver the long vision that sustainability needs. I think that leaves us a little animation.
We mustn't have the illusion that we can design the whole thing. And I think we shouldn't even want to necessarily. We should create something that can evolve. The oceans are in fact public space, and the continents represent community. We wanted to build a park first and then build a city inside that.
This wall is a sort of new fringe between the landscape and the city. Then you also have the tide. Those are floating cities we attach to the outer barrier.
The grid is basically a grid of dike creates the conditions for new ways of farming.
创造一个环境作为一种城市蔓延的一个基础，也将它作为一个用来控制水位高度的一个大脑。
We get three different types of cells. We can create a self-sustaining module. With these wind corridors, we can place wind turbines.
We are developing this wall for farm.
So to wrap it up, all these designers have radically
different views, and they're obviously all very, very valuable. What it means is that if we're building new cities from scratch, maybe we can simulate them first in the computer. More importantly, there is no fixed model yet. All of you have to contribute to these, let's say, open source eco-cities of the future. Thank you.